Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library, and I am so excited to be here with one of my favorite authors, Olivia Waite, who I've had contact with you like several times over the years, but I've never actually sat down to have a conversation with you. So you're going to be in so much trouble today. We're going to have a blast.
I am looking forward to it.
Excellent. So before we get started, I just want to say thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. And I'd like to thank Olivia for letting us share this program with other libraries, because when libraries work together, we make magic. And I'd like to let you know that you can buy signed books by Olivia from our favorite indie bookstore, Aesop's Fable. I will put a link to that in either in the chat or in the recap email I send out to everybody. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show. If you have questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Put your questions in there, and we will also be paying attention to the chat. But sometimes that goes by too quickly for me to catch all the questions, so use the Q&A. Olivia Waite is a romance writer. Oh my goodness, but she's now written a mystery, and she was the first one that I discovered writing amazing FF romances. And it's hard enough to find FF romances, to find amazing ones was like gold. So welcome, Olivia. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, hi, Mina and everyone. Thrilled to be talking about this today.
Excellent. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your most recent book, which is not necessarily a romance.
No, it's a mystery with romantic elements in space. So sci-fi, sapphic, murder mystery. Um, it's been a great time. First of all, just a little bit about me. My name's Olivia. I got started reading at a pretty young age, and the first romance novel I read was also the first sci-fi novel I read. It was Joanna Lindsey, and it was outer space, talking spaceship, barbarian, security, heroine, hijinks.
Yep.
If you've seen Jupiter Ascending, that's basically what it was.
Warrior,
So
Warrior's Woman, right?
that's the one. Fabio on the cover and everything.
Yep. Yep.
And I was 5.
No.
I stole it from my mom, and when she caught me reading it, she took it away. And I had to wait until I was old enough to get my own library card so I could track down a copy and actually finish the book, which tells you a little bit about how determined baby Olivia was and how much she cared about the ending of the book. So ever since then, I've just been on a tear. I've read everything that I could get my hands on. My mom's friend, um, let's see, it was Ernie's wife, whose name I'm totally blanking on right now. She used to bring me bagfuls, like grocery store bags full of mystery novels. Because she would read them. She'd get them from her friends. She'd get them from the bookstore. She would read through them really quickly. And then she would bring the bagfuls over to our house. And I would then read them. So, like Lillian Jackson Braun. I read a bunch of, I'm sure there was some Agatha Christie in there, but there was also a lot of MC Beaton. So, kind of those classic cozy mysteries. And yeah, it's been a while since I've been reading as much mystery, but I've gotten back into it in the past few years. I loved Alyssa Cole's thrillers. I've been reading um the Hilary Tamar romances.
Oh, I don't know if I know those.
Ooh, I saw this recommendation from Anne Leckie. And let me see. They're by Sarah Caldwell, and there's 4 of them. And I wish there were 400.
Hillary.
They're Sarah Caldwell, Hilary Tamar. Sorry, Hilary Tamar. There. Um, and they're written in 1980, but they're contemporaries. And they're about an Oxford law history professor named Hilary Tamar
Mhm.
and some of Hilary's former students who are now fancy pants lawyers in London. And they spend way too much time at lunch drinking wine and writing letters to one another about tax evasion cases that almost inevitably lead to a murder that they have to solve by going somewhere fancy and writing more letters to one another. And they're very arch and they're very low-key queer. Like these people are just kind of casually sleeping with everybody in this very like witty Oscar Wilde kind of way.
Mhm.
It's just delightful. They're so much fun.
I never thought I'd want to read a book that was Oscar Wilde-ish in its sexual escapades, but now I am intrigued.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to say that MC Beaton is, I think, Marion Chesney, who
Yes.
I like totally read when I was younger, and I loved, loved, loved her.
Yeah, the classic Regencies. I think that's how I found the MC Beaton books was I read every Marion Chesney I could get from the library.
Yeah.
And then MC Beaton, they're like also writing as MC Beaton. And I'm like, well, time to read those.
Well, very good books, all of them. Okay, so I told you, I promised you that we were going to dig into your history a little bit. So
Mhm.
you said you started reading very early and you started reading romances very early. But who, like, what made you want to write?
I think I think it happened kind of accidentally. My brain's not good at shutting up. And so I tried to read until I was tired. And my parents said, no, you have to sleep eventually, turn off the lights and go to bed, as parents wisely do. Um, so I would sit there in the dark, bored. My brain still wouldn't shut up. And I'd be like, well, okay, let's tell myself that story. And inevitably, I would start telling myself other stories and I would start imagining things. And whether I was worried about, if I was worried about something, I would tell myself a story about how I would respond. Like when I saw Jurassic Park for the first time and developed a terrifying fear of velociraptors coming in to eat me. Even though, look, I was a dinosaur kid, I knew the dinosaurs were dead. I'm like, they're all dead. They're not going to get you. And I'm like, but what if they do? But what if they do, says my brain. And
Mhm,
I'm like, okay, if they do, you grab the thickest book off your nightstand and you throw it at them and you go out the window while they're confused.
mhm,
And it turned into this like just habit. I'd lay down and I'd hunker up and I'd say, okay, where am I starting tonight's story? And I would build these just long, elaborate daydreams just as a form of self-distraction. And then I would inevitably kind of drift off partway through, so they'd get really weird at points. And then I'd wake up and go, well, why were they doing that? And I would either think of reasons or say, no, no, they wouldn't do that. They would do something else. And these tended to be like sprawly fantasy epics. There tended to be romantic plots because I always loved romantic plots even as a kid. I loved fairy tales and Greek myths and people getting in over their head about romance and sex and everything. So,
Um, I just have to ask, Joanna and Lindsay's books are pretty sexy.
yeah.
Five. Did you even know what you were reading?
Well, I'd already found my mom's Greek mythology textbooks, so I like, unfortunately, I wasn't like, I had some notion of what was going on, but it was the kind of thing where I'm like, what's the big deal about this? You were as a kid, you're just like, well, I don't understand that. So you just skip over it because, there's plenty of things you don't understand as a kid. So you're like, well, that seems weird.
Okay.
So, again, it's not a course of study I would necessarily recommend for 5-year-olds, but also it was like, I don't think it did me necessarily any harm.
No, it certainly didn't us with your book, so I'm good with that. But what kind of kid were you? Like, I know it sounds like you were a reader. Were you outgoing? Were you athletic? Were you quiet? Were you dramatic? What were you like as a kid?
My mom tells me that my first full sentence as a child was, I self it. So I think it's safe to say that I was stubborn and independent. I liked following rules. I liked having a structure. Um, I was raised very Catholic and I was raised with a lot of, as the eldest daughter, I was raised with a lot of expectations. I was the first grandchild on one side of the family, so I was kind of like blazing the trail in
Mhm.
terms of how the adults were all going to relate to a baby in the family. So it became kind of, like I said, there were a lot of expectations that I felt I was meant to live up to, and I liked being a rule follower, except when I thought the rules didn't make sense, and then I would dig in my heels and be like, "How dare you?" It was. So yeah, I was very content to just sit and read on my own. I was very good at self-entertaining, but if you like, if you asked me to do something that I thought was unjust or like cruel or like, just something I refused to do, didn't feel like doing, I would kick up a fuss.
Mhm.
So,
Good. I want to go back to this one thing you said was that being a trailblazer, because I think in my mind you are a total trailblazer in this in the romance genre because again, yours was one of the first books I found, that had the FF storyline that was such a good, well-written book, and also so odd, like
Yeah.
I mean, like celestial mechanics, knitting, sci-fi, romance, FF. I mean, where did this all come from? That's why I'm digging into your past a little bit because I'm like, what?
Well, so there's a famous Toni Morrison quote about a book, or no, is it Toni Morrison? Is it Angela? No.
Is
If
it?
a book doesn't exist, you're gonna have to write it. If the book you want doesn't exist, you need to write it. Um, is like I ran headlong into that wall when I was younger. I had been reading a lot of FF romance that I had really connected with. Um, I had just come out as bisexual in about I think 2016 was when that happened. But
Mhm.
I'd been reading FF romance for a couple of years, including sci-fi FF like Kathy Pegow's Rule Breaker, which is magnificent.
I have
It's
to
the
put that
best.
in the chat because I
Yeah,
want
here, let me.
to.
Kathy.
We're going to be talking definitely some recommendations. Awesome. So I'm going to
Excellent.
read the
So
left.
yeah. Um, So I had started reviewing for the Seattle Review of Books. I'd been published for a few years at this point. My first publisher had gone out of business. I was looking for a new publisher. I was sending out manuscripts. I finished a project and I said, okay, well, until I hear back about that, I need to start writing the next thing. And I think I want to write something that's just for me. And so I'd been looking for an FF historical to review, and they were hard to find, especially in like the earlier days of the internet. Um, And I'd been asking like publicists at Avon and Kensington and other places, Berkeley probably. I'd been asking them, hey, if you have any FF historicals, like they're getting top priority, send them right to me. And nobody had any. And I was like, well, I know what an Avon historical sounds like. I've read hundreds of them. And I'm like, that's what I want. And I'm like, well, what if I tried writing one? And I took this old idea I had about a scholar and a countess meeting and like turn and I'm like, well, that scholar could be a woman, why not? And so it just took off. And so I'm like, since I'm just writing this for me, I can put in all the fun stuff. I can put in all the descriptions that I like. I can put in like all the astronomy stuff. I can talk about embroidery that I was teaching myself to do at the time. So it was really just kind of a fun means of exploration. And because I was thinking about all these different aspects, the connections were very apparent, and that came out in the text. And then this thing I had done as I was like just kind of entertaining myself until I'm like, I'll just write this until a more marketable idea comes out. Because at the time, like kind of the wisdom was that FF romance didn't sell. And then this manuscript I pitched to an Avon editor at a conference later that year, and she was like, "Yeah, send me that." And the next thing I know, I had a 3 book offer. And it was a little bit of a roller coaster. Suddenly I had an agent and a 3 book offer, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to be doing this."
I'm so glad that you did though, because again, in searching for in I think it was a historical that I missed out on, and it was embroidery, not knitting. Is that there were no historicals that I thought were that I could really dig into.
Mhm.
And yours was the first, not just because of the characters, but because of what they did, and the fact that you wrote it like sort of for yourself and then it became this big hit. How did that hit you like as a writer?
Well, it was really exciting. I went to RWA in New York when like right after Ladies Guide came out. It was within like 2 weeks, and people were like, "Oh my God, everybody's talking about your book," and I'm like, "You can't be serious." Like this is weird. Especially because I'd been a professional author for about what 7 years at that point, 8. Ladies Guide came out in 2019, I think.
That's
Um,
seems about the right around the time that I had read it. I don't know.
yeah, because 2019, because Waspish Widows came out during the pandemic, and I
Yes.
wrote Hellions Waltz during the pandemic, so it was right around that kind of pivot point. And so it was clear, like, and my editors told me and my agent told me, they're like, yeah, this is a bit of a hit. This is like a thing that people are doing now. And I think part of it was, you mentioned being a trailblazer, but no trailblazer really blazes trails alone, as they say, as they say. Um, Avon had been putting out like gay historicals like Vincent Verga in like the 1970s, and they'd stopped for a long time. But then Cat Sebastian, of course, had been writing MM for Avon for a few years at that point. And her numbers had been spectacular. And her books, of course, are wonderful. They're big favorites of mine. I still remember the first time I saw a Cat Sebastian book. I was I have this we have this small cozy book club, and we would get together at a cafe and just like talk books. And then somebody brought a Cat Sebastian to say, "Oh, hey, I just picked this up earlier today. We should read this for our next book club." And I looked down and I thought, "Oh, that's clever. Somebody's copying the Avon font on like an MM historical. That's really savvy." And they're like, "Olivia, this is an Avon book." And I'm like, "Oh my God. A, I hadn't realized I'd recognize the Avon font automatically. And B, Avon's doing queer stuff now." And I was so excited.
I think Kit Webb was my favorite book of that year when it came out.
Oh yeah. Kit Webb is excellent.
Yeah.
I
So
think Marion's slightly my favorite of the two, but like it's dealer's choice kind of a situation. They're both so good.
I won't fight you on it because I agree. Like they're all of her books are amazing.
Yeah.
Hers, KJ Charles, but they were not writing FF. And
No. Alyssa Cole was the first modern Avon FF. She had Once Ghosted, Twice Shy that came out a couple of months before Ladies Guide.
mhm, I love her too. Just in terms of her perspective on the world, I think is unique and I just love it. Um,
And you want to talk about like heroes and heroines who are doing interesting stuff. Alyssa Cole's got that in spades,
right.
like in her historicals as well as her contemporaries. It's really rewarding as a reader.
Yeah, but also I think that separately from that, I think you're sort of a unicorn of romance writing because you can throw in anything and I'll read it. You know, like you said, the embroidery, the astronomy, the beekeeping, and now the sci-fi memory thing. Like, what is that? Like let's talk about this book that just came out in March. It's called Memory Murder. Oh my God,
Murder by memory.
Murder by Memory. And it is completely different. So, like, I don't get how you do that. Like, most people get into a rut, they write the same thing. I'm thinking Janet Ivanovich. Like, they're just not, they're just, they have this one thing down and they're going to do it forever. And it's amazing. And you keep like breaking the mold. What is that about?
Well, again, that's something that I think authors have a chance to do now in a way they didn't before. Like it used to be that, in the older romance days, like you mentioned, Janet Ivanovich, and also people like Nora Roberts, you would get into your groove, and then you would just stay there, and they wanted you to consistently just stick with whatever your brand was.
Mhm.
So, like Sophie Jordan, for instance, would be just writing historicals. And lately, and partly I think due to self-published and hybrid authors, they've really broken ground in being able to address multiple genres. Alyssa Cole's done that as a self-pub author. She was self-publishing. Was she self-publishing the post-apocalyptic novels? I can't remember now, but she's definitely self-published some things, as well as doing both thrillers and historical, like big historical epics. Courtney Milan, of course, did the historicals, but she also did the contemporary series that began with Trade Me.
Mhm.
Um,
Freddie Malone.
Rose Lerner does a really interesting thing where she has a shared world, and most of it's this cozy Regency small town romance, and one of it's like the most gothic sapphic thing you've ever read. It's like the most murderous Jane Eyre retelling. It's incredible. It literally gave me nightmares. I was so excited. Like I was reading the book and I'm really enjoying it, and I go to sleep and I was dreaming I was on this like coast overlooking the ocean, and the coast was on fire, and I'm like, I know whose fault this is. I know how I ended up here. This is Rose's fault.
She's amazing. Weren't you in conversation with her recently for one of the libraries in Massachusetts?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um Rose and I have been friends since like she was being published by Dorchester years and years ago at the very first romance conference I attended, and a mutual friend introduced us. So we've been buddies for like, oh my God, 10 years,
Oh,
15,
wow.
long time. Yeah.
Because I've recently discovered her, but I really yeah, I mean I think you're right. There's more space in some ways for these different things, but your path is so twisty, you know.
Yeah, that is a good term for it.
I really love it. Like, I mean, Sam is asking about Gothic Sapphic. That's Rose Learners. That was the book that you were talking about. But you know, like I wouldn't have expected that you would have gone from the three books that you had with Avon to this Murder by Memory because it's so different in so many ways.
Give me just one second. I'm putting The Wife in the Attic is the Gothic one. Like
Mhm.
everything else is like, here's a small town baker falling in love with his baking shop assistant, and it's super cute and super horny and wonderful and low key and deeply well researched. And then The Wife in the Attic is like Jane Eyre. The governess is a Sephardic Jew, and her family suffered greatly during the Spanish Inquisition, and the stories have been passed down. And so there's a whole thread of that that's kind of woven into this terrifying house with a hidden wife who's being locked away. And like it's so good and creepy. It's amazing.
And that kind of thing, it always surprises me and amuses me about authors is that again, that not staying in your lane thing. Because she could have easily just kept writing what she was writing and being popular
Mhm.
with it, but she was like, nope, I'm gonna do something different. I do want to say, Olivia, when you are writing in the chat to make sure you click on everyone because right now
Oh,
I shared it with everybody, but you were only sharing it with me and you.
that's
Um,
good to know.
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Murder by Memory for a minute.
Mhm.
What led you to writing this kind of story after writing your the trilogy from Avon?
Well, I've always been a sci-fi fan, as I was saying, like Douglas Adams from I literally have a Douglas Adams tattoo. So that's always been something I was reading. There's a reason I'm following Ann Leckie's book recommendation. But it was during the early lockdowns, like the peak lockdowns of the pandemic, and things were frightening. And I was heading into like a big surgical procedure, and I was sitting there watching murder mysteries as a way of like giving my brain small problems it could solve because there were huge problems I couldn't solve. And I'm like, okay, this is just like, this is how I'm going to get through this. It's just, kind of giving my brain something to chew on that wasn't everything terrible in the world. And then so there I was watching all the Poirot TV series while reading a bunch of Wodehouse cruise ship books with terrifying aunts. And then I saw somebody on Twitter say, why aren't there more locked room mysteries on like generation ships? And for those of you who don't read sci-fi, a generation ship is like a big spaceship, and it's going on a journey that's going to take it thousands of years. And so instead of getting there during the crew's lifetime, they assume they're going to have several generations who are born, live, and die on the ship. And so, like, this is one of the classic sci-fi tropes. And I thought, well, why aren't there more murder mysteries on generation ships? And they're like, yeah, it's a perfect locked room. And I'm like, it is. And so I was thinking about Wodehouse cruise ships and generation ships and murder mysteries, and my brain went whack. And I thought, I know what that looks like. Here, let me get started. And so I like just, again, it started as a fun little game for my brain to play, and then it kind of just took off.
Mhm.
And it was so much fun to write. And I wrote the first one super quick. And in the writing of the first one, I had a lot of other things that I was thinking about the world, and I realized this is going to be a series.
Yeah, and they're novellas, they're short, so they're easy, quick, easy reads. So what made you go in that direction too? Because you've just written three full-length well, they came out in paperback
Yeah.
books.
Well, I'm pretty sure that was like just because Murderbot, because nobody had any focus for like huge epics anymore. Everybody was like, I need something that's going to be a good payoff and is not going to sit there and squat on my TBR and make me feel guilty.
Mhm.
Novellas are there. Novellas are like, I'm not going to ask too much of you. I'm going to take up the exact amount of space I need and then get out of your way.
And
And doing that kind of work in a small space is also a really interesting challenge. So it's not just like, oh, I'm trying to be shallow and glib. It's how do you do really intricate world building in a very short amount of time? It's like, when you see somebody build, like, I mean, that's why we're also fascinated with doll houses, right? Is because they have detailed architecture in a very small space. We're fascinated by the tension there.
Mhm.
And so I think novellas do the same thing. Like you have to be super economical. Every word has to be considered, but you also don't have to like add filler for filler's sake.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I feel like the arbitrary definitions of length by word count,
Mhm.
I come up a lot from a lot of Discworld reading, so I don't think in chapters. So my brain just wants to write the amount of story that is appropriate for the story, and then I figure out how long it is at the end.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't think of it as glib. I think of it as tight.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of spare words there, but you get the picture,
yeah.
which is awesome. Okay, so I'm going to ask some of the questions from the audience, which to veer away from mine, but they're just as good. Doing historical research, what has been one of your favorite things to learn or most unexpected? One that fans like to bring up the most?
Oh, I think for me, one of the favorite things was when I wrote the chicken book, which is it's one of my self-published, and it is a novella, and it's called Hen Fever. And it's because I found a stock photo once on a website that's a woman dressed in very elegant Victorian, like a visiting dress, like she's, gonna go outdoors walking. It's not like a ball gown. But she looks very elegant and she's very pretty and she's holding a chicken. And that's it. It's just like beautiful woman holding chicken.
Hmm.
I'm like, what? What is going on here? And I'm like, well, I wanna write whatever book has this photo on the cover. So I Googled Victorian chickens and a whole world opened up because it turns out during Queen Victoria's reign, right around the time of the Crimean War, there was a bubble in fancy chicken breeds in England. Like the tulip bubble in Amsterdam. And so what had happened was somebody had given Victoria a pair of chickens, a very fancy pair of chickens from China. I forget which species exactly. It's the poofy head ones. You'd know them if you saw them. And this had kicked off a whole chicken breeding craze, and people like bid up huge prices for exotic chicken breed eggs, and everybody got really into it. And you had poultry shows and like elaborate chicken coops that looked like palaces. And you had people competing for like, and in there's just like online, there's just incredible amounts of 1860s chicken raising literature in magazines that has now been digitized, and like the fights these people had and the arguments about judging and the deep well of resentment over the competitions. And I'm like, this is amazing. All the stuff I need as a writer is right here.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I mean, I always find that interesting. And I know we talked about this before we started about getting ideas, is that you can just take one little thing. A writer can take one little thing and make an entire story out of it. Like I would never have thought looking at a woman with the chicken in the Victorian times that it had a story behind it. But you were like, oh no.
There's something here, yeah. And I mean, not all the ideas pan out, but I think it's just, I think it's like a muscle. Like if you exercise it and if you practice and if you get into the mindset of, and it's not always good. Like you don't want to sit there and be and turn everything about your life into story material, because that can get really creepy really fast. Like we've all met people who are like just eager to turn everything into a story, and then to the point where it feels like they're stealing your life. And I think that's why I like historical fiction, because then if I'm stealing from the dead and it's not going to bother them. Like writing contemporary fiction based on real people would squick me right out. I'm like, I'm not the boss of these people. They're doing their own thing.
But it's also really funny because we were just talking about this a second ago, is that even Sarah McLean has moved from historical, now she has a contemporary out. So
Yeah.
we'll have to ask her if she gets squeed.
My hunch is no. Like, I think this might be something particular to me, and I'm not ruling. I mean, I've written a short contemporary story, but I give myself a different level of responsibility when I'm making up modern day people than when I do historical people.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because somebody might recognize himself in a contemporary.
Yes. So I try to like, if I'm writing contemporary, I will probably not, you know, I will probably not do a ripped from the headlines thing. Whereas if I'm writing historical, I'm like, well, these are now archival headlines. That's entirely different somehow.
Right. Only their ancestors or not ancestors, their descendants
The
could act.
descendants, yeah.
Um, but one of the parts of this question is what is a historical fact from one of your books that your fans bring up the most?
You know, I think I think that's a good question. I don't tend to I don't know that I have a very vocal fandom. Like I get emails from folks and it's wonderful and I love it. And people send me art. People respond to the art the most, I think.
Mhm.
Um, I did have one reader who was an astronomer who got very upset at what I think astronomers do all day. And I'm like, well, no, not now. But like in 1820, yeah, this is literally what they did. I'm sorry. But I think the surprising thing for a lot of people is how much more history there is in the Regency than you see from a lot of Regency romances. Like, we're very focused on this narrow upper class white Regency.
Mhm.
Your dukes, even Jane Austen, it's a very narrow slice of life that Jane Austen is giving you a picture of.
Mhm.
And as soon as you start branching out into things like in Waspish Widows, you see a widow who's running a print shop, even though like women the line is always, oh, women can't own businesses in the Regency. Well, plenty of them did. They ran them under their husband's name, or they ran them under their father's name, or they inherited when someone died and kept running the business. And there's a lot of records of this. And I think people find that very surprising because it breaks with this idea of, oh, every woman has to have a chaperone and no woman can own property. And I'm like, well, yeah, it just takes an extra step, and that's a burden, and we shouldn't have to do it. But women were going to be doing it because somebody had to,
Mhm.
essentially.
Mhm. And women have been doing stuff throughout history. It
Yeah.
just hasn't been told. And I think for me, like that's the biggest or the nicest thing about the last couple decades, I think, is that more of these stories have been coming out, not just about women, but about people of color, about, people
Yes.
or diversities and things like that, disabled or enabled people. Like it just, we've been hearing more stories gives a fuller view of the world as it has been.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you my favorite story about historical probability.
Okay.
So
Oh,
once
wait,
upon a time,
is this a math question?
no, no, don't worry, no math required. I have seen two Broadway shows in my lifetime, and one of them was Hamilton, and one of them was The Scarlet Pimpernel. And these happen coincidentally to be overlapping in time. They happen roughly in the same era. And so I was thinking about that coincidence one day, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if you would write like a little fanfic about the Scarlet Pimpernel working together with somebody from like Hamilton? Wouldn't that be like, and again, my brain likes to play these kind of games. And I thought, well, Elizabeth, like Eliza actually ends up, or Angelica, not in, yeah, Eliza, the one who he doesn't marry. Angelica ends up in England at the time the Scarlet Pimpernel would have been active. And I'm like, oh, of course, like she's gonna end up at one of the fancy balls. She's gonna ask the Scarlet Pimpernel to help her break someone out of France. Well, who do we know in France? What is Lafayette up to? And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Okay, so where was Lafayette during like this period of the French Revolution? And I'm going along and I'm like, oh, turns out, yeah, Lafayette spent some time in prison in Austria. He was imprisoned as a revolutionary, essentially, by a monarch who didn't want the French Revolution to happen in Austria. So, and I'm like, oh, well, how long did he spend in prison? Well, he was there for a little while, and then Angelica Schuyler broke him out. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, hang on, and there's a letter where Angelica Schuyler hired somebody to bust Lafayette out of prison. This little fanfic in my head turned out to actually be historically, factually true. He didn't stay out of prison long because his German wasn't very good. He misunderstood the directions and got recaptured. But that's what kind of broke this idea of historical probability for me. I'm like, no. Okay, if it's physically possible, somebody was probably doing it. We just don't have the records. So, yes, it's illegal to be queer in Regency England, but if nobody's really asking too many questions and you pretend you're just good buddies sharing a house, like it's probably fine. This probably happened a lot.
Mhm.
Like,
I always think that about the lady's companion.
yep,
Yeah, I
yep,
mean, why else would there be one?
exactly. Like, oh, the old women, they always need a friend to kind of hang out with and travel with and be buried next to. Like, like the ladies of Langoland, they were a thing. They set up house together and the Prince Regent went to visit, and it's like, no, but they're probably just friends, probably.
Oh,
Certainly. Why would anybody not be friends?
that's it. Nobody ever talked about sex either, so it's fine.
Oh yeah, we definitely don't have political cartoons about like, the Lord Admiral's wife and her best friend making out on a bench in Hyde Park. We do. We have that political cartoon.
Which is again funny because unless somebody points it out, we don't think it exists. Like if you
Yeah.
were to say there's this thing, like this card, most people wouldn't know about it because we're
Mhm.
not doing the research and we just take in or have over time taken in what was fed to us. But now we're being fed like a full buffet, which is amazing.
Yeah. And then like even if the Regency was as restrictive as we thought, like the 1700s weren't. Like the Regency was a narrowing of women's like cultural expression um and like modes of etiquette and things like that. There was like who is it? Mariah Fitzhugh? No. I'm terrible with names. I'm so bad with names. I think COVID's made it worse, but no, who am I thinking of? It's terrible when I'm researching and then the only names I can remember are the ones I was looking up. But her name is Mariah Edgeworth,
I,
novelist, very
okay.
popular, incredibly successful, supported herself with novels. And people just forget. People like, oh, Jane Austen, she's the only female author. We don't have to think about anyone else. Marie Curie, only female scientist. Uh, Carolyn Herschel, even. Like, we only have to think about her. And I'm
Right.
like, no, there's lots.
Enough to break our brains if we actually made some effort. Okay, so another question. Who are your favorite they were besties roomies? This is what we're talking about, um, i.e. actually sapphic couples from history.
Look, I know it's basic, but I do love the ladies of Langolan. I think they're so cool. Like they were supposed to marry other people and they basically just said no and moved to the country with a garden and they were like they made themselves interesting enough that the Prince Regent gave them a pension and was like, "Yeah, you'll be fine. Like here's 50 pounds a year or something." I forget what the actual number, but they lived as they wanted and they were buried together and they were it's there's a lot of speculation about whether or not they were just friends or also lovers or whether anything romantic was going on and I'm like either way this is a life that they chose and they made for themselves even when everybody was telling them this wasn't really an option.
Mhm.
I think that kind of thing's beautiful. And of course there's always I think the thing that I love most about Anne Lister is that she wrote all her diaries in code, and I like spy books too, and so that gets to me. I if I had not started my diaries in English, I think I would try to write them in code.
It's never too late.
Yeah, that might be something to work out in future. I'd have to figure out what kind of code and what kind of cipher, and I'm like, no.
Well, you're busy writing books for us, so you don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that our perceptions of the past are based on, you know, our own repressions of this time,
Mm,
whatever they are. And so we don't expect that people back then had any of the same proclivities, I'll say. But
yeah.
the truth is that people are human, and human beings are always human.
Yeah. They're gonna make the same mistakes and they're gonna have the same beautiful ideas. It's just a question of I think it's just a question of balance, but there's always somebody trying something somewhere.
Right. And they're queer people and they're Black people and they're Chinese people.
Exactly.
Like they're all in those places and they're not all slaves or servants. I think
Right.
some more reading to really understand the full depth of humanity in these different ages.
I keep hoping somebody's going to write one of the like a Regency set in one of the utopian societies, like all the people going off to live socialist and free love based lives in Regency England, and they all ended disastrously. So obviously murder has to come into it somewhere. But like people were trying that kind of thing. And you read about people like the public universal friend who was someone who rejected gender and went around preaching
Mhm.
and like yeah, people were doing that kind of thing like in the past. It wasn't a modern invention.
No, no.
It was it's just a question of what kind of access they have and what kind of records have been preserved a lot of times.
Mhm.
Who gets to tell the stories? I mean, I hate to use the Hamilton reference again, but like, but it's a good reference for a reason.
It is, but a lot of that history is there. We just have to dig it up. Um,
Yeah, it's
a lot of it is
just not hit the mainstream in a way.
right, and a lot of it is lost, but so is other histories. So I just
Yeah.
had a program a couple of weeks ago with this somebody who talked about how people survived in Anglo-Saxon England, and I had no idea that Anglo-Saxon women could just walk away from a marriage. They
Yep.
had money from their families, and they were like, I don't like you," and they could just literally walk away, and there was no repercussion.
Yeah.
I'm like, this was Anglo-Saxon. This was like 1066. And yet, it became such,
Well, that Norman invasion really kind of screwed it up for everyone.
yeah.
But
As
even into the Regency, a lot of lower class marriages, you could get divorced by just moving out. Like people would accept it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, you'd be like snarked at by the old ladies, but also because there was no national marriage registry that people could consult, if you wanted out of your marriage, you moved and you started over and nobody could prove you'd done anything wrong.
Oh,
Like, because it's not like people carried photo ID.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was, I mean, it was hard, but there's little things like that in history that you don't really think of. I had a really horrifying realization the other day, which I was thinking about freckles and how everybody in supposedly ye old times, like, really dislikes freckles, and freckles are, to be prevented at all costs because they mar your beauty. And nowadays it's so tempting to be smug and think, well, we're so enlightened, we know freckles can be beautiful. And I'm like, freckles would probably be really scary in a world where you couldn't distinguish between freckles and melanoma. And so all of these, like, you must wear your bonnet, we don't have sunblock.
Mhm.
Like, you don't want skin cancer. That stuff is unsightly and it will kill you.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so, like, all the anti-freckle advice is actually just like early dermatology in like its non-scientific form. And I'm like, oh, people are rational. They were right to be nervous about freckles.
Mhm. Yep. Okay, so I have a few more questions from the audience that I want to get to. What advice would you have for someone who wants to write their first romance novel?
Oh my gosh. First of all, absolutely do it. You are going to have a horrible, wonderful time. There's going to be a time when you will think it's the worst idea in the entire world. That's usually about two-thirds through. Keep going.
Mhm.
Um, just try and shut up the voice that tells you what you're doing is silly. Try and, if you have to be silly to get through it, get through it. You can skip the sex scenes if you feel weird about it. You can always put stuff in later. Just give it a try, find what works for you, write the bits you are enjoying writing,
Mhm.
and then try and get it to be a complete story if you can. Just because that's very hard to do the first time. If you can do that the first time, then hopefully you can do it a second time. Every writer I know does not know how to write a book until they're doing it. It sounds really dumb, but every time every writer I know finishes a book, they think, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I finished that." And then they start the next one and they're like, "Maybe this is going to be the book I won't finish." Maybe I've lost my touch. Every writer worries about being good enough. So
Mhm.
that's not a reason to not do it.
Mhm.
It's it's so fun. It's a fun thing to get to do. So enjoy it. Don't beat yourself up if you think it's not living up to your expectations.
Right. It's a lot of work. Like people think it just magically happens, but it is a lot of work, right?
No, you're gonna want to put your fist through a wall multiple times. You're gonna hate that book at some point.
Mhm. It's many points I've heard.
Many points. Yeah, you're gonna hate it during drafting, you're gonna hate it during edits, you're gonna hate it more during copy edits, and then eventually you're gonna be like, you know what? It's done. And then you're gonna hate it a little bit sometimes when you realize what you could have done 10 years down the road. It's just You're gonna love it and you're gonna hate it. And that's normal.
And then you'll get readers that are like, why'd you do that? Or when is the next book coming out? The
But
day
you'll
after.
also get readers who are like, I loved when this happened, or I liked this so much.
Mhm.
And that's worth all of it, honestly. Having somebody tell you that they connected with your work. People will say, I really enjoyed this part, or oh my gosh, it's a lesbian chicken book. I need this so much. I am a lesbian chicken farmer. And I'm like, huzzah, this is the book for you.
So, isn't there another saying that there are no non-readers? They're just readers that haven't found the right book yet?
Yeah, I think that's true. Like, I think that, I mean, look, I think there's plenty of cool things to do that aren't reading. Like, look at the painters. Oh my God, right?
Mm.
Like, those people are not reading as many books as a reader. And that's fine. They're painting. That's great. Let the artists do the art.
Art is, art can mean so many different ways. Jessica asks, how do you manage your TBR pile? As a New York Times romance columnist and as a reader for non-professional purposes, how many books do you read a year? How do you decide what to read?
I have had to become a mood reader just because if I tried to do like the spreadsheet and read things in order and prioritize, I would very quickly lose all of my courage and stop doing any of it. It's it's a nonstop it's a nonstop pressure thing. And this is a brutal question. I congratulate you. That is a really like that's a knife to the throat question. I don't know how many books I read a year, but it's a lot. I read more that end up in the column. The column usually is definitely three, often four books per month,
Oh my gosh.
plus all of the ones that don't quite work out, plus all the ones that I only read partly because I tried them and I want something else. Sometimes there are books I want to get into the column that just don't fit with the other books. Sometimes I cram those books in anyways because I love them. Other times I find a bunch of books that seem thematically connected and I want to talk about those connections. And so even though there's a book I loved, maybe it ends up in a later column, maybe I don't get to talk about it at all. There's always more books than I have space for, both as a reader and as a columnist. And so those are the most gutting decisions that I make is what to cover and what to leave out. And oh, I do wish I could talk more about backlist books because there's such a rich thread of romance backlists, and I feel like people have barely even gotten to touch on it in terms of criticism. Like we've had reviews for a lot of years, but in terms of like sustained critical attention, it's been a little rough. I've been rereading a lot of the Kinsale books I read as a youth, and they're so much better than I'd remembered. Like I'd remembered, oh yeah, Kinsale, she's great. And I picked them up lately and I'm like, no, these are masterpieces.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
So so yeah, so it's very much I try to let I try to let my heart guide me just because it's the best way of making the decision. And it's the one I can beat myself up least about.
Do you get time at all to just pleasure read?
I make time. Every couple of months I'm like, you're gonna read a book just for fun.
Mhm.
Problem is you know what happened when you read romance for work is sometimes you try to pick up other things for fun and oh my God, for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years now, I've been working my way through Proust. Like,
Why?
no, I love it. It's so good. It's so wonderful. I'm eating it up like it's the most delicious food in the world. A, nobody told me there were lesbians in this, but there are lesbians in this. And B, it's just unutterably wonderful. I mean, it's rich, it's complex. All the jokes are true. It's pretentious. The sentences go on for pages. I don't understand some of the philosophy. He kind of paints himself into this corner philosophically sometimes, and I'm like, Marcel, I don't know where you're going with this, but man, I'm excited to get there. And it's been so wonderful. And it's a man who's all up in his own head all the time, and he's anxious and he's telling the story out of order in these big long words, and it's just oh man, I can't get enough of it. It's so good.
Wow, I never thought I'd hear that, but okay.
Yeah. So, when I need to take a little time, I sit down and I read a couple chapters of I believe it's the Moncrief translation I'm working my way through. And then I'm gonna try when I finish that, I'm gonna try the other the newer translation, who I forget that's who's done that. But it's been great. And I sneak in mysteries and sci-fi when I can. And yeah. So I have to make time for the pleasure reading because otherwise I'll start to feel like I'm just part of the marketing grind and no good criticism happens when you're not enjoying it. So
Absolutely, I agree with that. So, we mentioned Murderbot and the new show
mhm.
has just come out with Alexander Skarsgård. So, who would play your characters if we were to get a show?
Oh my God.
Well,
Uh,
let's stay with
Murder by Memory, yeah.
sorry,
Harriet Walter.
well,
Like
but
in
let's.
a dream world, Harriet Walter.
I don't know her. Who is she?
Um, oh my God. So she plays Harriet Vane in an older adaptation of three of the Lord Peter Wimsey novels.
Yep, 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 yep.
But you probably know her most from, the Emma Thompson Sense and Sensibility. She's Fanny. She's the horrible sister-in-law.
Oh,
She's a fantastic actress. She's been wonderful in so many things. She's in Ted Lasso. I think she's Rebecca's mom.
Yep, yep, yep.
And
That's
I just love her to pieces. I think she's elegant. I think she's wry. I think she's got exactly the right kind of stern arch tone.
Lisa says she's in Belgravia.
Yeah. Yeah, she must be. I haven't made my way through that one yet, but
Okay. All right. So we have an actress. Let's talk a little bit more about it since we just have a few more minutes because the first book came out in March
mhm.
and the next book is coming out in
Next
2020.
March.
What?
Next March, 2026.
So is that the plan to like have a book out every year?
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
many will be in the series?
Three for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the series, the arc I've plotted for six. But Tor very wisely said, yeah, three is fine. And I'm like, yes, that is acceptable. No, it's great. This was the first time I'd sold, like, Ladies Guide was a series, but it's kind of a loosely connected series where you can hop on at any point. Murder by Memory is much more of a through line.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got an arc that we're building, and we've got surprises in store, and we've got, you know, oh man, it's been so much fun. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had such a good time with it. And the second one is up for pre-order now. The cover is going to be revealed later this month, in just a few days, actually. The 22nd, I believe.
Ooh,
The title is Nobody's Baby. And it's this same ship where your memories are stored in a book in the library, and every time your body wears out, they just upload your memories into a new body so you can keep going. And then also murders happen. So it's a bunch of people who've been adults for like 300 years at this point, and suddenly, out of nowhere, a wild baby appears.
Ooh.
And Dorothy, our detective, has to figure out where the baby came from, why, and whose is it, and why don't they remember it?
So wait. How can they have been adults for 300 years? Don't they have to have babies so they can have new people to put brains into?
No, honestly, because that's creepy. Like, that's the whole point of like the Anne Leckie books is imposing a brain on someone's body is creepy. It's a creepy colonial thing to do, and I agree. Um, they 3D print them essentially. They're constructed. So bodies are constructed at the age of, I forget if it's 20 or 25, but I should figure that out while I do edits. Um, but yeah, because nobody wants to go through puberty more times than they have to.
Not even once.
So yeah, so you get to be an adult. Basically, when this ship was starting out, they also figured, what's really freaky is pregnancy in space. Nobody wants to deal with any of that. Plus, if we're not having babies, then the population will remain stable. So it's like, okay, we're just going to hit pause on the whole fertility thing until we arrive where we're going.
Wow. It sounds like to me like such a like statement about like the world as it is and how it could be in just like a little pod.
Yeah.
If
No,
you
it's a little escapist, but it's a little bit like, how Star Trek is technically a utopia, but everybody's always making terrible decisions and being people anyways. It's that kind of thing. I'm not really interested in dystopia, but I am interested in we have solved some problems, but not all of them.
right. Well, you can't because again, that human factor,
Yeah,
right?
people are going to be people.
Yeah. So is are there does everybody have like a job, or is this detective thing sort of like something that fell on her, or
We're going to get into that in a big way in book three, but the short version is many people have jobs. Like you don't have to have a job. Jobs are very well paid though, so a lot of people take jobs. So janitors and medical are incredibly highly paid because those are very necessary jobs.
agreed?
Yeah. But people run businesses for the fun of it. And we saw this during the pandemic. Like, who do you know in the pandemic that did nothing? And it's very few people. People started doing art, people started doing hobbies, people thought about opening yarn stores, people baked bread.
Mhm.
Like, people do not like to be idle with nothing to do. And if you tell them, well, your housing and food is all taken care of, they're like, great, I'm going to run a movie theater. I'm going to start a bar. I'm going to run a yarn store and do knitting classes. And I'm going to take a painting class. I'm going to get really, really into the local sports league. Like, people will find ways of filling the time.
I think I'd still be a librarian. Do they have librarians on your ship?
Yes.
Of
Yeah.
course, a library, but it's the
Of course.
library brains, is it?
Yeah, that's a capital L librarian. They get special training. But yeah, no, there's lending libraries.
Okay, all right.
I think
Just
I'll have to put those in a later book. We haven't seen them um because the on the ship they have what are called retro mats where you can produce anything that you can remember. But of course you have to remember it really, really precisely. So like if you try to produce a book from a retro mat, it doesn't come out quite right. Because like the pages will be stuck together, it'll be missing scenes, something will happen. But if you're looking at schematics for like, say, a printing press, you can probably print each individual piece without too much trouble.
Mhm.
You envision a strut, bam, you envision a piece of type, bam. And so people have assembled like really quite complex machines to do a lot of this printing. So there's a thriving magazine culture.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, people are writing books all the time. We do see one of the private libraries in book two. We see the library at the Antikythera Club.
Mhm. I I'm so all over that. But because like it sounds like you kind of like really thought of everything that would enable people to have a full life, even though they're
Mhm.
on this ship and they can't go anywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because the point of the ship is it's got that cruise ship sense. It's a transitional place. So
Mhm.
you want it to be luxurious, you want it to be comfortable, you want it to be entertaining.
Mhm.
Um, and then in theory, the real problems happen when the ship arrives. But of course, in practice, somebody always goes overboard,
Mhm.
right?
So
I
they've
mean, not always, not every cruise ship has somebody like
been,
go overboard, but in fiction, yes, they do.
but they've been in space for 300 years. How long are they gonna be in space?
1,000. It's a
Oh,
1,000-year journey, give or take. I haven't decided if they arrive on time or not. That's one of the things I have to figure out before that book comes up.
it sounds so lost in space to me. I love it.
Yeah. No, it's been really fun to kind of explore and find out what questions I want to ask next. So
Mhm.
yeah, book two is about like, what about children? What if you're like, because there's also this weird thing, right, where because you'll get issued a new body, sometimes you'll be younger than your older relatives, and sometimes you'll be older than your younger relatives, and vice versa. So you get to play with age dynamics a lot, which is very interesting. So like in the first book, Ruthie is younger than Dorothy, but because she's been put in the wrong body and it's a younger body, she's actually younger than Ruthie. So she's younger than her nephew briefly.
Mhm.
And does that change their dynamic? Does that have an impact? And it's just fun for an author to get to be like, okay, here's our adorable young nephew, age 85.
Oh, Benjamin Button for you.
Yeah,
I can't believe how much you've packed into such a short story. It's just amazing, you
it
know.
was it was a ton of fun to write. Yeah, it's been a delightful game to play.
It's awesome. Well, I hope you all read it. It's wonderful. Although I think I'm gonna try to read. I'm gonna reread your first series, so I wait for the second book to come out too, because I like to read things quickly.
Well, there's also if you're looking for more like sapphic sci-fi, there's the Massa and Platy books by Malka Older.
Ooh.
Those are like sapphic Sherlock and Watson set on Jupiter, where people have had to leave Earth because of a catastrophe, and they're academics studying Earth to try and figure out is it going to be made habitable again. There's like rail lines going all around the gas planet. There's little it's a bunch like the civilization is a bunch of platforms connected by rail on this like gas giant. It's and they're just fantastically like they're very restrained. They're very like they have that classic detective tone where like that very Sherlock kind of formality.
Mhm.
They're just lovely.
Oh, well, I will, of course, take any of your recommendations because
Yeah.
you, I feel like you know me. Because I love your books, you know me.
Malka Older, Massa and Platy.
Okay, I will definitely look that up and I hope you all do too. Olivia, thank you so much. This hour has flown by and I did get to ask you all of those deep digging questions I wanted to. So I really appreciate everybody's time in letting me do that. Um, and I really look forward to everything you write, everything.
Well, it's been an absolute honor to be here. I hope everybody in the audience had fun as well. And Mina, it's been such a delightful chat.
I expected it would be, but this is even better than I ever thought it could be. So thank you, Olivia. I hope you have a wonderful night and everybody, happy reading.